Hey, this is the chair guy. When I first started playing, what I really wanted was to improvise over the blues, and it's still one of my biggest passions. But when I would ask teachers and musicians about it, they would say, well, you need to play and play and play all kinds of different songs, and then one day, one glorious day, you might be able to improvise yourself. And it really isn't true. I'm going to show you a very simple way to start improvising right now. Improvising and composing are really the same thing, except that with improvising, you are composing on the spot. And that sounds complicated and maybe a little scary at first, but it's actually very simple because you're just going to follow a certain logic. So for instance, today we're going to use a backing track from guitarplayback.com. That's David Walliman's website where he has some great backing tracks, and I will put a link to that in the description. But this is going to be an E minor blues backing track, and that kind of tells us all we need to know to start, because the logic is that you're playing in E minor, which means that you're going to use probably an E minor pentatonic scale because we're playing in the blues. And all that means is that we're taking two notes away from the 7-note diatonic scale and only using the 5 strongest notes. There's no notes next to each other, and so they're all going to sound really good together, and they're going to sound good over all the chords. As usual, we're going to be using my chair system instead of boxes. It's really the same thing. It's just a different way of looking at the pentatonic scale. Each of these chairs is going to be all 5 notes of the pentatonic scale, and we're going to look at them as scale degree numbers instead of letters. I will put the letters up here, but the reason that we're using numbers is that when you use letters, they all kind of have the same value to you, especially when you're going from key to key. So scale degree numbers make certain things much simpler. Because we're only playing in pentatonic, of course, we're using our first, our third, our fourth, our fifth, and our seventh. The first note that we have to worry about is, of course, our root, our first. And the root is your home. It's the place that you start out in the morning. It's the place that you usually end up at night. So you're going to start there and you're going to end there, and that's the place you feel most at home. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start this backing track, and first we're just going to get the beat. Most of these are going to be in 4/4, so it should be relatively simple. And we're just going to sit at home. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you can't follow this perfectly, don't worry. Following the beat comes with time. Cool, so you're following the beat. But it's obviously going to get really boring if all you ever do is sit at home. So let's move to our third. Our 3 most solid notes in the pentatonic scale are going to be our first, third, and fifth. That's going to be the triad. Those are the notes that make up the E minor chord. And so they're all going to be great places to stay. Look at the third as your friend Fred's house. This is a place that you do stay at a lot. You crash on the couch from time to time, and it's just a solid place to begin and end as well. Even though you're always going to be going back home eventually, you can stay for a while at your friend's house. So that's just your first and your third. Those are both really solid notes. You can go in between them and you can start making a story. So you're at home, you're playing around, you go to your friend Fred's house and you spend some time there and you come back. Now, the third place that you might want to stay is your fifth. That's your girlfriend, Sally. You also stay there a lot and you're really comfortable being there. And so that's another place that you can begin and end your phrases. So you're telling just a slightly different story. Instead of getting up and going over to Fred's for a while and coming back, now you're getting up and you're going to Sally's for a little bit. And you can jump between the two. Start up at home. Go to Fred's. Go to Sally's. Go between the two. So that's 3 of your 5 notes. Now you just have 2 other notes. You've got your 4th and you've got your 7th. And look at these as places that you're not quite as home as your 3rd and your 5th, but they're places that you like to stop off. So let's say that the 4th is the 7-Eleven. That's a place that you stop and you get drinks and you get a candy bar on your way to Sally or Fred's house. That's your 4th. And so you're just telling a little story. You're getting up, you're playing around for a while, you go over to Fred's house, you go to the 7-Eleven, you go back to Fred's house, you come home. And you can do that in a number of different combinations. Now what's really cool is that, first of all, we are staying right in this area. We're just using these 3 strings that are above and below your root. And so Sally actually lives more than one place. Instead of looking at your root as being just at the beginning of the scale, I find it's best to look at it as the middle of the scale. So in other words, you can play notes that are above and below the root. So Sally here, the 5th is also right here. It's right beside the root. You're always going to have a 5th right beside your root. So Sally's always very close. And your 4th is right here before Sally. And your 7th, which is, let's call that the bowling alley. That's a place you might spend a little time, but not a whole lot. You're going to have a 7th right here. It's your lower 7th, but it's still the 7th because it's a lot harder to reach this 7th way over here. We're wanting to stick to just these 3 strings. So now we're going to get up in the morning. We're going to go to Fred's house. We're going to go to Sally's house. Maybe we stop at the 7-Eleven. Maybe we stop at the bowling alley and we go home. And so now you have a type of logic. You've got your home, you've got Fred's house, you've got Sally's house, you got the 7-Eleven and the bowling alley, or whatever you want to use for that metaphor, and you just start trying to tell this simple story. And of course, the more complicated you get, you can start really filling out that story in your mind. Like maybe you go over to Fred's house and you get in a fight. So you go to Sally's. Maybe you get in a fight with Sally. No matter what, you're probably going to end up at home. But this is just a very simple way to create stories and learn to improvise. And of course, the more you do this, the more complicated you can get. And you just become more and more flexible using all of these notes. And of course, eventually you can move up to the diatonic scale, which instead of looking at it as more complicated, I say just look at it as more flexible. And what's most important is just having fun. Don't overcomplicate this. You're just improvising.